He met her on a bright afternoon, the kind of day where the sun warms your face and makes everything seem possible. He remembered feeling nervous and excited at the same time, like butterflies in his stomach were doing a small dance. There was something about her smile, soft and genuine, that made him feel instantly comfortable. She laughed easily at his jokes, even the bad ones, and he liked that. He liked that a lot. In the beginning, everything was simple. They would meet at cafes, walk through the park, or sit by the river and talk about anything and everything. He told her stories about his childhood, about his dreams for the future, and she listened with her head tilted, her eyes full of curiosity. She shared her own stories too, small details about her life that made him feel closer to her. They talked about movies, books, music, and sometimes they didn't talk at all. Silence didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt like they were meant to be there together, even without words. He often thought about how lucky he was to have found her. He would tell his friends about her, showing pictures and sharing small details about her quirks and habits. He liked the way she twirled her hair when she was thinking, the way she tapped her fingers when she was excited, and even the way she frowned when something upset her. To him, every little thing made her perfect. He believed she felt the same way about him. That belief made him brave enough to dream about the future, about the life they could build together. They started spending more time together. Weekends were no longer about being alone or doing his usual activities. Instead, he found himself planning weekends around her schedule, thinking about what would make her happy. Sometimes it was small, like bringing her favorite coffee or remembering to call her at the right moment. Other times it was bigger, like planning a surprise picnic or buying tickets for a movie she had wanted to see. Each time he saw her smile, each time she thanked him, he felt a warmth in his chest that he could not describe. He thought he had found happiness, real and unshakable at first. He didn't notice the little arguments that came now and then. They were small, easily dismissed. Maybe she was tired, maybe he said something wrong. But over time, those little moments started to pile up. He began to notice that sometimes she would seem distant, her eyes wandering when he talked, her laughter a bit forced. He brushed it off, thinking it was just stress from work or personal matters she didn't want to share. He trusted her, so he believed she was always honest with him. And because he believed that, he felt safe, secure in their relationship. He began to introduce her to more people in his life. Friends, colleagues, even a few family members. He liked showing her off, proudly saying she was someone special. She seemed happy. But he noticed that sometimes she would nod politely or smile gently in situations where he expected excitement. Again, he told himself it was just her personality, quiet and reserved, not a reflection of her feelings for him. He wanted to believe the best about her because he loved her. As months passed, their relationship deepened. They celebrated small victories together, like finishing a tough week at work or accomplishing a personal goal. They comforted each other during bad days, offering hugs, words of encouragement, or simply a silent presence. It was comforting, the feeling of having someone who understood you, someone who could sense your mood without needing an explanation. He thought this was what love was supposed to feel like, a mixture of comfort, excitement, and trust. Yet there were moments he felt uneasy. Sometimes she would avoid certain questions or change topics quickly. Sometimes she seemed to hesitate before answering. He noticed it, but he didn't want to confront it directly. He feared it might seem like he didn't trust her, and he didn't want to risk making her feel pressured. Instead, he chose to believe that she was just private, that she had reasons for keeping some things to herself. He convinced himself that love meant patience. They should be understanding and gentle. One evening, after a long day at work, he decided to surprise her with a small dinner at her apartment. He cooked her favorite meal, something simple but thoughtful. She was pleased, her eyes lighting up as she entered and smelled the food. They laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed each other's company. He felt that same warmth he had felt in the very beginning, that sense of connection that made the world seem lighter. He thought, maybe this is forever. Maybe this is what life should feel like when you are in love. They continued building memories together, going on trips, exploring new parts of the city, trying out new foods, and meeting new people. Each experience felt special because they shared it together. He began to imagine a life with her, thinking about future holidays, shared apartments, and even the possibility of starting a family. He talked about these ideas casually, testing the waters, and she would smile and nod. He read her reactions as agreement, as if she shared the same vision of the future. However, in the background, small inconsistencies started to appear. She would sometimes be vague about where she had been or who she had been with. Sometimes she would avoid messages for hours, and when he asked why, she would brush it off with excuses that seemed reasonable but left him with a tiny seed of doubt. He ignored it mostly, telling himself it was paranoia that he was reading too much into minor things. He wanted to trust her, and trusting her felt like the only way to be happy. Then came the day that changed everything, though he didn't know it yet. It was a casual afternoon, and they were walking through a crowded street. He held her hand, feeling the comfort of her fingers in his. Suddenly, she stopped and looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen before. It was serious but not angry. She took a deep breath and told him she needed to talk. His stomach sank a little, sensing the weight in her tone. They moved to a quieter spot, and she began to speak about her feelings, her worries, and the truth about some things he hadn't known. He listened, but not everything made sense yet. His mind tried to connect the dots, but confusion clouded his understanding. He felt a mix of emotions, concern, frustration, and a touch of fear. The comfort he had felt with her now felt distant, like a warm room suddenly empty of light. She explained that some of her actions, which he had interpreted as distance or secrecy, were meant to protect him, to prevent him from unnecessary pain. His first reaction was disbelief. How could she do that without telling him? He felt a sting, a tiny jab of betrayal, though he knew deep down that she didn't mean harm. Over the next few days, they continued talking, trying to navigate the confusion. He asked questions, wanting clarity, and she answered honestly. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place, but it was not an easy process. He had to confront feelings of mistrust he hadn't known existed, realize that some of his assumptions about her had been wrong, and reflect on the times he may have overreacted or misunderstood her. It was uncomfortable. It's like pulling out a thorn that had been stuck under his skin for a long time. Even with the confusion, he realized he still cared deeply for her. Despite the doubts and the slight pain in his heart, he wanted to understand, to repair, and to move forward. He remembered why he fell in love with her in the first place: her laughter, her kindness, her curiosity about the world, and the way she made him feel alive. He wanted to hold on to that, even as he faced the new reality of their relationship. By the end of that week, he began to feel a cautious sense of hope. He realized that love was not just about happy moments and easy smiles. It was also about patience, understanding, and learning to see things from someone else's perspective. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he wanted to try, to communicate better, and to be fair. For the first time, he truly began to see her as a full person, with her own struggles and reasons, instead of a figure in his own story. That period of reflection set the stage for what was to come. He was about to face challenges that would test his patience, judgment, and sense of pride. Little did he know that the choices he would make next would lead to a public humiliation he never imagined, eventually to a truth that would change everything he thought he knew about love and trust. But for now, in this moment, he held on to hope, believing that understanding and patience could guide them through any storm. And that belief, fragile yet persistent, kept him moving forward, step by step. Into the unknown path ahead, after weeks of trying to understand her, he felt like he was walking on thin ice. The warmth and connection that had once felt so natural now seemed fragile. Every conversation, every small disagreement, felt like it could tip him over. He tried to keep his emotions in check, but the anxiety was creeping in. He was afraid that if he made one wrong move, he could lose her entirely. One evening, they met at a quiet cafe. It's the kind where the soft hum of conversation makes you feel like you're in your own world. He noticed she seemed distant, her eyes wandering across the room instead of meeting his. He asked her gently if something was wrong. She took a deep breath and told him that she felt overwhelmed. She had been hiding some personal struggles, issues he didn't fully understand, and it had caused her to distance herself. He listened, trying to absorb the information, but the explanations felt incomplete. There were gaps he couldn't fill, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. The next day, he noticed that she was replying to messages slower than usual. The small seed of doubt began to grow. He asked himself whether he was overreacting, but the unease remained. He remembered every little time she had seemed distant before and began to question everything. Had he missed signs? Had she been honest with him from the start? He tried to tell himself that trust was important, but the questions wouldn't stop coming. As days went by, he started feeling restless. He wanted clarity and reassurance, but at the same time, he didn't want to push her away. He remembered the first months when everything seemed so easy and simple. That memory made him ache, wishing things could go back to that place of carefree laughter and shared dreams. He longed for the comfort of holding her hand while walking through the park, talking about everything and nothing. But now, that simple comfort felt just out of reach. One evening, during a group gathering with friends, he noticed how she interacted with others. She laughed and joked easily with some people, but when he approached, she seemed tense, careful with her words. He couldn't understand why she could be relaxed with others but guarded with him. The frustration and confusion built inside him. In that moment, he felt a flicker of anger, not at her, but at the situation itself. Why was it so complicated now? Why had things changed? The tension between them reached a breaking point one afternoon. He had been thinking about the inconsistencies, the vague explanations, and the distance that had grown between them. He confronted her, asking pointed questions about where she had been and why she had seemed so distant. She tried to answer calmly, explaining that she had been dealing with personal issues she hadn't wanted to burden him with. But he wasn't satisfied. His emotions had taken over, and he demanded more, seeking specifics he felt he deserved. The conversation ended with frustration and tears, leaving both of them feeling drained. In the days that followed, he felt a mix of regret and anger. Regret that he had pushed her, anger that he hadn't been given the full picture sooner. He began to act impulsively, posting messages online, hinting at betrayal and dishonesty. He shared vague stories with friends, trying to make sense of his pain, but instead, he ended up spreading rumors and creating a public narrative that painted her in a negative light. Every time he hit send or posted a comment, he felt a surge of relief mixed with guilt. Relief that he was expressing himself, guilt that he might be hurting someone he cared about. He noticed the reactions immediately. Some friends supported him, offering comfort and encouragement. Others were unsure, questioning whether he was overreacting. But he focused on those who agreed with him, allowing their validation to fuel his anger. He didn't fully see the damage he was causing. Not to her, not to himself, not to the trust that had once been so strong. His perspective was clouded by the hurt he felt, and he believed that exposing the truth, as he saw it, was the only way to protect himself. Meanwhile, she remained mostly silent. She didn't retaliate or respond publicly, which confused him. He expected confrontation, defense, or even a public statement from her side, but there was nothing. This silence made him feel victorious at first, as if the world had finally seen the situation from his perspective. Yet deep down, there was a quiet voice telling him that something was wrong, that this wasn't the whole story. His obsession with clarity and justification began to affect his daily life. At work, he was distracted, thinking about the posts, the messages, and the perceived betrayal. At home, he replayed every conversation, every glance, every moment that had seemed off. Friends noticed his mood swings, but he brushed them off, unwilling to admit that he was spiraling. He believed he was justified, that his feelings of betrayal were real and deserved recognition. The public aspect of his frustration escalated. He shared personal anecdotes online, hinting at dishonesty and deception without revealing details. His posts were emotional, filled with anger and hurt, and they spread quickly. People began to comment, take sides, and speculate. Some offered support, some criticized, and some simply watched the drama unfold. The situation that had once been private and intimate was now public, a spectacle that he could not fully control. At the same time, he felt an odd mix of pride and shame. pride that he was standing up for himself, that he was exposing what he saw as wrongdoing. Shame that he had crossed boundaries, that his posts were hurting someone he had once loved. These conflicting emotions left him restless, unsure how to navigate the storm he had created. Each day brought a new wave of notifications. Each comment a reminder that his actions had consequences far beyond what he had anticipated. Despite the chaos, he didn't reach out to her directly in a calm, understanding way. He wanted to, but his pride and hurt made it difficult. Instead, he relied on the public eye to validate his feelings. He told himself that she needed to see the consequences of her actions, that he deserved acknowledgement, even if it came from strangers. This reliance on public opinion only fueled the tension, widening the gap between them and making reconciliation seem impossible. Friends began to notice a change in him. The easygoing, loving person they had known was now tense, defensive, and quick to anger. Conversations that once flowed naturally now ended with arguments or awkward silence. Even those who supported him began to hesitate, unsure if his actions were fair or justified. He didn't see it yet, but his behavior was pushing people away, creating walls that would be difficult to break down later. Meanwhile, she continued to navigate her own struggles quietly. She didn't engage in the public conflict, choosing instead to focus on her life and the challenges she had kept hidden. She felt hurt and misunderstood, watching the man she once loved turn her story into a public spectacle. Each post and comment felt like a wound, a misunderstanding amplified by his anger and the opinions of others. She wanted to reach out, to clarify, to protect herself. But she feared that any attempt would be dismissed or used against her, as the days turned into weeks. He began to notice a shift. The validation he received from others online started to feel hollow. The excitement of attention faded, replaced by an emptiness he couldn't ignore. He realized that the situation was not bringing him closure or understanding. Instead, it was deepening his frustration and regret. The story he had created publicly was not the truth, but a reflection of his pain and assumptions. He started to reflect on his actions. The posts he had made, the messages he had sent, and the way he had treated her. Guilt began to creep in, a slow, heavy weight that he could not ignore. He remembered the person he had fallen in love with, the kindness and patience she had shown, and he realized how unfairly he had acted. The public humiliation he had inflicted was unnecessary, and he began to see the consequences of his impulsive behavior in the quiet moments. Alone in his apartment, he replayed the memories of their early days, the laughter, the shared dreams, the comfort of simply being together. He realized that the anger and confusion that had driven him to public humiliation were based on misunderstandings, incomplete information, and his own insecurities. The weight of regret pressed down on him, and he began to understand that repairing the damage would require more than words. It would require humility, patience, and a willingness to see the truth from her perspective. Part 2 ends with him at a crossroads, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions and beginning to understand that the story he had created publicly was not the full truth. He was starting to feel the first stirrings of regret, a recognition that his behavior had hurt someone he cared deeply about. The stage was set for the revelation that would change everything, forcing him to confront the reality of his own actions and the truth about her side of the story. After weeks of confusion and public tension, he started noticing small clues that made him question his own version of events. Friends who were close to both of them began to share subtle hints, stories that didn't match what he had believed. One friend casually mentioned that she had been handling a serious family issue, one she had kept secret to avoid burdening him. Another friend said she had been helping someone else in need, which explained some of her unexplained absences. These pieces of information didn't reach him all at once, but each small revelation chipped away at his certainty. He began to feel uneasy. The anger that had once fueled him now turned into confusion and doubt. He replayed every interaction in his mind, trying to fit these new pieces of information into the puzzle he thought he had solved. Some memories suddenly seemed distorted. Moments he had thought of as neglect or deception now appeared in a different light. His posts online, the messages he had sent, even the rumors he had spread began to feel like mistakes. Actions taken without the full picture, At first he tried to ignore it. Pride and embarrassment made it hard to admit he had been wrong. He didn't want to face the possibility that he had caused unnecessary pain to someone he loved. But the evidence kept surfacing. Casual conversations, social media hints, even random encounters began to reveal the truth bit by bit. He felt as if the ground beneath him was shifting, and he was forced to confront a reality he hadn't been ready for. He remembered the quiet moments they had shared at the beginning, how she had trusted him with her thoughts and emotions, and how much he had cherished that. That memory contrasted sharply with the chaos he had created publicly. He realized that the person he had portrayed in his posts, the one he had accused of dishonesty, was not the full picture. She had never intended to hurt him. In fact, many of her actions had been motivated by care and protection. The realization was painful. He began to feel a heavy weight in his chest, a mix of guilt, shame, and sorrow. He thought about the hurtful posts, the rumors, and the casual conversations where he had spread his version of events. He could see now how unfair and damaging his behavior had been. The more he thought about it, the deeper his regret grew. He had humiliated someone who had only ever shown him love and respect, and he had done it without knowing the full truth. In the days that followed, he struggled to regain a sense of balance. He found it difficult to talk to friends, because their support had been built on the misunderstanding. Every conversation reminded him of his mistakes. He wanted to apologize, to explain himself, but he also feared that it might be too late, that the damage was irreparable. The thought of her seeing him as a cruel or thoughtless person made him anxious and self-conscious. He began to reflect on his own behavior in a way he hadn't before. He realized that his reactions had been fueled by insecurity, by fear of being hurt, and by a lack of communication. He had assumed the worst without asking, and he had let his emotions guide his actions instead of taking the time to understand the situation. This self-awareness was uncomfortable, forcing him to confront flaws he had never acknowledged. But it was also the first step toward growth. One afternoon, he decided to take a walk alone to clear his mind. The streets were busy, people moving in their own directions, unaware of the emotional storm inside him. He thought about how quickly anger and misunderstanding could spiral out of control. He remembered her laughter, her kindness, the small gestures that had once made him feel loved. And he realized that all of those moments had been overshadowed by his impatience and judgment. The realization made him ache. A physical reminder of his regret, he began reaching out quietly to mutual friends. Seeking more information to understand the truth fully, he listened carefully to what they had to say, taking notes in his mind, trying to piece together the full story. Each revelation made him more aware of how much he had misunderstood. The casual comments he had ignored before now took on new meaning. The moments he had perceived as neglect or deception were actually evidence of her care. Efforts and sacrifices that he had failed to recognize. The more he learned, the more he understood the depth of his mistakes. He had been quick to anger, eager to justify his feelings publicly, and careless with her reputation. He felt a deep, gnawing remorse, the kind that keeps you awake at night and makes you replay every interaction over and over. He wished he could take it all back, undo the posts, erase the messages, and return to a time when they were happy and trusting of each other. During this period of reflection, he also noticed how much the public narrative had influenced his own thinking. The attention, the comments, the sides people took, they had all made it harder for him to see the truth. He realized that he had allowed outside opinions to guide his emotions, rather than focusing on the person he knew and loved. This awareness was humbling. He understood that real understanding required listening and patience, not impulsive reactions or the validation of strangers. He began drafting apologies in his mind, rehearsing the words he wished he could say. He wanted to explain that he had acted out of misunderstanding, that he hadn't known the full story, and that he regretted the pain he caused. But even in his thoughts, he knew that words might not be enough. Actions would have to match the sincerity of his feelings, and he would need to demonstrate change over time. He had to prove that he had learned from his mistakes. As he reflected on all of this, he also started to see the strength in her silence. Despite being hurt, she hadn't retaliated publicly. She had endured the humiliation with dignity, choosing to handle her challenges quietly. This realization made him respect her even more and deepened his sense of guilt. He saw that her actions were far more mature and compassionate than his own, and it became clear that he had a lot to learn about empathy and patience. He remembered specific moments when he had misjudged her. The times she had been distant, which he had interpreted as dishonesty, were actually times when she had been protecting him from worry or managing her own struggles. He had reacted without understanding, letting fear and pride guide him. The clarity that came with this realization was both painful and enlightening. It forced him to confront his flaws while also providing a path toward redemption in the quiet hours of the night, reflected on his journey so far. From the first days of joy and connection to the breakdown in communication and public humiliation, he saw a clear line of cause and effect. Each action he had taken had consequences, and the ones he had caused were tangible and painful. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, reminding him that understanding and patience were crucial in any relationship. Despite the guilt and regret, he began to feel a cautious sense of hope. If he could learn from his mistakes, if he could approach her with humility and sincerity, perhaps there was a chance to repair what had been broken. He knew it wouldn't be easy, and he knew it might take time, but he wanted to try. The knowledge he had gained, painful as it was, gave him a roadmap for change. Part 3 ends with him at the edge of realization. Having gathered pieces of the truth and begun to understand the depth of his errors, the anger and humiliation that had consumed him are now giving way to reflection, guilt, and the first glimmer of remorse. He is preparing to confront the reality of the situation and take the steps necessary to make amends. Setting the stage for the revelation that will change everything, the revelation came slowly. Not as a sudden event, but as a series of moments that made everything he had believed crumble. It started with a quiet conversation with one of their mutual friends, someone who knew her struggles intimately. She explained the full story, the reasons behind her distance, her decisions, and the sacrifices she had made silently. He listened, absorbing every word, feeling his heart sink as he realized the depth of his misunderstanding. She had been dealing with serious family issues, problems that she couldn't share with him because she didn't want to burden him. She had been managing responsibilities he hadn't known existed, helping someone else in need, and making decisions that protected both herself and him from unnecessary pain. Every time she had seemed distant, every unexplained absence had a reason rooted in care, not deception. Each revelation felt like a weight lifting and simultaneously pressing down on him, because he understood now how wrong he had been as he pieced together the timeline. He could see exactly how his assumptions had led him astray. He remembered times when she had tried to explain, moments when he had misinterpreted her words or dismissed her intentions. He thought about all the social media posts, the vague messages, the public comments he had made, and felt a wave of shame so strong it made him physically recoil. He had humiliated her in public while she had been acting with dignity and respect. He had done it without knowing the truth. The guilt was overwhelming. He thought of her watching the world react to his actions, feeling misunderstood and hurt. He could almost see her sitting alone, quietly handling everything, her patience contrasting with his impulsiveness. Every detail of the revelation deepened his remorse. He realized that love was not only about joy and comfort, but also about understanding, empathy, and giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. He had failed in all of those ways. He began to reflect on his own behavior more critically. He realized how much his pride, insecurity, and need for validation had driven him to act without thinking. His anger had clouded his judgment, and the public attention had made him blind to the real story. He understood that true love required patience and trust, and that he had not given her either. Every post, every rumor, every comment he had made in anger was a reminder of his mistakes, and the thought of her pain pierced him deeply. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he had acted out of ignorance and emotion, not malice. But he hesitated, fearing that words alone would not be enough. He knew he needed to show his sincerity through actions, through understanding, and through time. The first step was to stop the public narrative, to take down the posts, and to reflect on how he could make amends without expecting anything in return. This humility was uncomfortable, but he recognized it as necessary. Over the following days, he carefully reached out to mutual friends, seeking more insight and verifying the details he had learned. Each conversation added depth to the picture he was forming. He began to understand the complexity of her situation and the selflessness she had displayed. Every small revelation reinforced the truth that he had judged too quickly and acted impulsively. His pride had made him blind, and now he had to face the full consequences of his actions. He also began to reflect on the public humiliation he had caused. He thought about how people had reacted, the opinions they had formed based on his posts, and the lasting impact on her reputation. The realization was painful. He understood that some damage might not be fully repairable, and that he could only take responsibility and do his best to make amends. He felt the weight of accountability pressing on him, and he accepted it as a necessary part of growth. The more he learned, the more he appreciated her strength and character. Despite the misunderstanding, despite the public scrutiny, she had remained calm, dignified, and patient. She had not retaliated or tried to hurt him in return. This realization deepened his respect for her and intensified his regret. He saw clearly now that his actions had been unkind and unfair, and he vowed to approach the situation with the humility and understanding it required. He started drafting letters and messages, not to justify his behavior, but to express genuine apology and acknowledgement of her pain. He wanted her to know that he understood the truth, that he recognized his mistakes, and that he regretted the hurt he had caused. But he also knew that the timing and manner of his apology mattered. He needed to be thoughtful, patient, and sincere, without expecting immediate forgiveness or reconciliation. In his private moments, reflected on the lessons he was learning. He realized that misunderstanding can escalate quickly when communication breaks down, and that assumptions can be dangerous. He understood the importance of empathy, the need to listen carefully, and the value of patience in relationships. He also saw how public attention could magnify misunderstandings and cause harm far beyond the immediate situation. He remembered specific moments when he had misjudged her, the times when he had let anger override trust, the times when he had publicly expressed frustration without knowing the full story. Each memory was a lesson, a reminder that love requires careful thought, restraint, and understanding. He began to feel a profound sense of humility, recognizing that growth comes from acknowledging mistakes and taking responsibility for them. During this period, he also began to observe her indirectly through the friends who still remained in contact with her. He saw how she continued her life with grace, handling challenges quietly, helping others when she could, and maintaining her dignity despite everything. This observation reinforced his respect for her and made his regret even sharper. He realized that he had lost sight of the person he loved. Focusing instead on his own hurt and assumptions, he felt a growing urgency to make amends, not out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine care and understanding. He wanted to express his remorse, acknowledge the truth, and demonstrate that he had learned from the experience. But he also knew that this process would take time, and that patience was as important in seeking forgiveness as it was in understanding the truth. As the days passed, he carefully considered how to approach her. He thought about her feelings, her perspective, and the respect she deserved. He wanted his words and actions to reflect sincerity, not desperation. He rehearsed conversations, planned how to communicate his understanding, and reflected on how he could ensure that his apology would be meaningful. He knew that reckoning with the truth required humility, patience, and a willingness to listen without defensiveness. Part 4 concludes. With him fully aware of the truth and the errors of his past behavior, he recognizes her sacrifices, the dignity she has maintained, and the depth of her character. He feels overwhelming guilt and regret, but also the first glimmer of hope that he can take responsibility, seek forgiveness, and grow from the experience. The story is at a turning point, with the revelation complete, and the path toward understanding, redemption, and possible reconciliation just beginning, with the full truth finally clear in his mind. He knew he had to take responsibility for his actions. The weight of guilt pressed heavily on him. But he also understood that acknowledging mistakes and seeking forgiveness was the only way forward. He wanted to apologize, but not in a way that demanded forgiveness or sought to justify what he had done. He wanted the apology to be sincere, full of understanding and humility, He decided to reach out to her privately. Choosing a quiet and respectful way to communicate, he wrote a long message, carefully choosing his words. He expressed his deep regret for the public humiliation he had caused, acknowledging that he had acted out of misunderstanding and emotion rather than truth. He told her that he now understood her struggles, her choices, and the reasons behind her actions. He made no excuses, only honesty, and a clear recognition of the pain he had inflicted. Sending the message was one of the hardest things he had ever done. His hands trembled as he hit send, not because he feared her reaction, but because he feared the weight of his own mistakes. He knew he could not erase the past, but he hoped that this step would demonstrate his sincerity and commitment to change. For the first time in weeks, he felt a mix of vulnerability and relief. He had acknowledged the truth, and he had taken the first step toward making amends. In the days that followed, he tried to be patient. He knew that her response, if any, would come in her own time. He focused on reflection, understanding, and growth. He spent time considering how he could avoid repeating such mistakes in the future, how he could be more empathetic, more patient, and more mindful of the consequences of his actions. He realized that personal growth often comes through discomfort, and that true humility requires facing one's own failures honestly. When she finally responded, her words were measured, but kind. She acknowledged his message and expressed her relief that he had come to understand the truth. She explained that while she had been hurt, she appreciated his willingness to reflect and take responsibility. Her words were not an immediate forgiveness, but they opened the door to communication, understanding, and possibly healing. He felt a wave of gratitude and humility wash over him. The acknowledgement was enough to begin the process of repairing the trust that had been broken. He began to take concrete steps to repair the damage he had caused publicly. He removed posts, clarified misunderstandings where appropriate, and ensured that any lingering rumors or misconceptions were addressed carefully and respectfully. It was not easy, as some people had already formed opinions based on his earlier actions, but he committed to honesty and integrity in these efforts. Every small action was a step toward restoring fairness and demonstrating that he had learned from his mistakes. During this period, he also reflected deeply on what love truly meant. He realized that love is not just about happiness and shared dreams, but about patience, empathy, understanding, and respect for the other person's experiences. He understood that trust must be nurtured and that assumptions can be dangerous. Every interaction, every decision, every word spoken or written can have lasting effects, and it is essential to approach relationships with care and thoughtfulness. He also made efforts to improve himself outside the relationship. He worked on controlling impulsive reactions, managing anger, and practicing patience. He sought to understand emotions before acting on them, to listen before judging, and to reflect before reacting. This self-improvement was difficult but necessary. He knew that personal growth would help him not only in relationships, but in life overall. Over time, he and she began to communicate more openly. They talked about the past, their misunderstandings, and their feelings. They explored ways to rebuild trust, starting slowly, with small gestures of honesty and consideration. He listened more than he spoke, giving her space to share her perspective without interruption or defense. The process was delicate, but each conversation helped to restore a sense of mutual respect and understanding. He learned to value silence and reflection as much as conversation. He understood that sometimes patience and careful listening are more powerful than words. He also recognized that true understanding requires effort, empathy, a willingness to accept the other person's reality without judgment. Each day brought new lessons, and each lesson strengthened his resolve to be more compassionate and thoughtful. As months passed, he noticed a change within himself. The anger and confusion that had once dominated his thoughts were replaced by humility, reflection, and a desire to act with integrity. He felt lighter, more aware, and more capable of forming healthy, respectful relationships. He knew that he could not undo the past completely, but he could shape the future with intention and care. He also began to understand the resilience and strength of the person he had hurt. Her patience, dignity, and compassion left a lasting impression on him. He realized that she had endured challenges silently, maintained her integrity, treated him with respect even when he had not deserved it. This understanding deepened his admiration and respect for her, reinforcing the lessons he had learned about empathy and humility. Eventually, he found a balance between acknowledging his past mistakes and moving forward. He learned that regret, when paired with reflection and action, can become a powerful force for personal growth. He understood that relationships require constant effort, understanding, and communication, and that it is essential to approach others with patience and care. The experience, though painful, had transformed him, teaching him lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. Part 5 concludes with him having faced the consequences of his actions, gained deep insight into the truth, and begun a path toward redemption. He has apologized sincerely, taken steps to repair public damage, reflected on personal flaws, and embraced growth. The story ends on a note of hope and self-awareness, emphasizing the importance of empathy, patience, humility, and the understanding that love is as much about learning and forgiveness as it is about happiness and connection.